Okay, so today we're going to talk about, I don't know if you guys can see the board. Today we're going to talk about a new theory that I've been developing for a while. You guys have heard me say dethrone your parents, dethrone the parents. So this is starting to get like sort of evolved. So this is sort of like the first lecture, putting it all together, and I'll start sort of naming the names and creating the theory and the steps for people to work. But what this is it's a family systems theory. So when I did the 7 gates, when I tell you about your psyche and your subconscious and your bad buckets, that comes from your parents. Okay, so your system, and that's always going to be the case, your system, and that's why I wrote Who Runs Your Kingdom. Your system is already established at the moment of conception with your mother, your father, and you. Okay, so you're that initial triangle. Everything begins at the moment of conception. Every person, place, thing, and situation is your mother and father. This does not change, but now I'm extrapolating it out to your family, and then how you are doing this and creating a monarchy or a kingdom within your own family with your children. And I don't think any of you have children, but you could see it with your brothers and your sisters if you're going to do it that way. Then in the I and the we and the Heros Gamos, the truth is in the triangle, I talk about that you kicked out one of your parents. Okay, so think about it. You kicked out this one parent from the kingdom. You thought you kicked them out of their psyche and you tried to do it differently, but you just did the opposite. You have to integrate the mistress, which indeed is the mother or the father that you kicked out, in order for your relationship to work. Well, the same thing we're going to follow through to the family, to the spouses, and then the children, whether you have 1 child or 3 children or 6 children. Again, this is in sort of the development stages, but I have the crux of what the model is going to look like. So I first want to start, like always, with some mythology, okay? Now, in Hercules mythology, and I highly recommend, I've said this before, to get the book, The Labors of Hercules, the myth associated with Ares, okay? So when we do start the astrology classes, I'm going to teach you the sort of normal mythology, but I'm going to teach you the esoteric mythology, has to do with Hercules going to this island where there are what they call man-eating mares. So these are literally like horses that eat the men. And there's symbolism in this because I'm going to explain why we went from sort of female empowerment, quote unquote, I say that lightly, to male empowerment, toxic masculinity as it's being termed, to what we're now establishing as sort of transgender and why that's happening, okay? So I need to start with this mythology. So in this myth, when Hercules was told by Hera, you have to do 12 labors. Basically, she figured he was going to die doing one of them, and then she could get rid of him because Hera didn't want any illegitimate children of Zeus, right? She hated all of his children. Hercules represents us. We're the hero. The 12 labors represents the 12 houses of the zodiac. Wherever you have Aries cusp, okay, that's where this takes place. So what happens is Hercules is told, go into control of these man-eating mares. They're devouring everybody on the countryside. And he does. He's very strong. He collects the horses, and then he sends his friend Abderus to take them. Well, Abderus is too weak. Okay, this is important. Abderus is too weak, and he gets trampled and dies. Hercules has to go back, collect the mares, gets them out of the countryside, save the day, pass the labor. Not so great, but at least he passed. Check. Every single one of you on your chart has Aries. Wherever you have that cusp, that's actually where your chart starts. Okay, so it's not, hold on. It's not at the ascendant. That is where the chart starts, the first house. But this myth, this what you're living out, starts there. So if you want to look at the chart, if not, it's still going to be applicable to you. But for those of you that like the astrology, Aries rules the head, but primarily Aries rules the thoughts. Okay, the man-eating mares are the thoughts. If you do not have control of your thoughts, you have control of nothing in your life. So some of you came last week to the Post-it Note Spirituality, and I said the metaphysical law, all is mind. Everything is mind. Everything that you're creating in your life, everything that is happening in your life is created from the subconscious. This is not a conscious process. So when Hercules gives the mares to Abderus, that's what we do. We give our thoughts, we give our control, we give our power over to our subconscious programming, which AKA is your parents. And again, it's not your parents as they're evil people. Some people have snow globes and are great. Some people have horrendous parents. Does not matter. It's the fact that you got your mind at the moment of conception from your mother and your father. That's the thoughts and the mom and dad that I'm referring to. I have to specify because sometimes people hear, oh, you're talking about my mom, and they lose sight. So I just, again, want to qualify that, okay? So your thoughts are being controlled by your parents, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about. Who runs your kingdom? Your kingdom I'm talking about is your mind. We all have a kingdom in our mind. And we all have man-eating mares, which are our thoughts, our personality, our destructive subconscious programming that we have no control over. And we hand it over freely to our parents, to the people in our life. Everybody is person, place, thing, or situation represents our parents. So therefore, our parents, and then we, cry and moan and complain why our life is the way we are because we're working unconsciously. We're working subconsciously. We need to bring this to a conscious level so that we are aware and we take responsibility so we don't continue repeating these patterns with ourselves, with our children, and then transgenerational trauma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what's happening. This is how this is passed on because we're not breaking it down to explain to people, okay? So your throne or your kingdom that I'm speaking of is your mind. And this goes back to Aries, which is ruled by Mars. Mars, we talked about 2 classes ago with the conflict class, is the creator energies, also the aggression, the conflict. And we all have conflict, or what I call a combative voice or a competitive voice in our psyche, where parts of us don't get along. We have incongruence. I'm not going to recap that, okay? So that's the first myth, is that we have to control our thoughts, but we have to know where our thoughts are coming from. If we don't understand where our thoughts are coming from, then we're just going to be in a beating up game. Oh, I'm so horrible. Oh, I'm so ugly. Oh, I'm a liar. Oh, I'm so fat. Oh, I'm dishonest. Oh, I'm judgmental. Oh, I suck at this. That doesn't solve anything. That's just more man-eating mares just growing and growing and growing, and you getting trampled by these thoughts. Herd them and take them out of the island. That's what today is in part, and of course all the other stuff that I've talked to you about before. The second myth that I want to talk to you about is Artemis and Apollo, and this is important. So I have a picture here of Artemis, and this is going to tie into the feminine. And you see that she's an archer, okay? In the myth of Artemis and Apollo, okay, so whether it's the masculine and feminine, or whether it's the astrology chart, or whether it's the sun and the moon, I don't care what you believe, there is a rational, masculine, logical principle in you that Jung called the anima, and there is a feminine, lunar, emotional part of you, animus, or the feminine. You have both. In the myth of Apollo and Artemis, they were twins. Okay, you're going to see in mythology twins repeated a lot. Oftentimes it's related to the higher mind, the lower mind, the male, the female. In this particular one, it's related to the masculine and feminine, which is my point of my lecture today, the law of gender and the law of the pendulum, and how those two metaphysical laws work together in our life, whether we know them or not, and how they're also showing up in the British monarchy that then influences our psyche and our family, okay? So Apollo and Artemis were twins. Artemis was born first, okay? So the female was born first. She had no time. Imagine birthing yourself, your mom popping you out, and 2 seconds later, you're taking care of the baby that's being born right after you. I mean, makes no sense, right? This is what happened to her. She had to take care of the masculine principle. Think of the importance of that in your life and in our society. The female part takes care of the masculine part, okay? And whatever that looks like in your life, you apply that to you. But there's a lesson there. There's a myth there. There's a programming there, okay? Today I'm going to talk about how these sort of qualities of masculine and feminine have been sort of shape-shifted and rearranged in our life and in the monarchy. So Artemis becomes the archer. She's considered a virgin goddess. She hides out in the forests. She's got a bunch of animals, and she's a warrior. Our nature comes from this myth. Back in the day, there were the Amazonians, okay? The myth of the Amazonians. Anyone see, not the most recent Wonder Woman, but the one before that with Chris Pine? Okay. That myth at the beginning of that story, and Diana is Artemis. They're the same. One is Roman, one is Greek, okay? So Wonder Woman is Diana. In the beginning of that movie, you see an island. That's considered the Amazon island where Diana or Wonder Woman comes from. And there's like this energetic seal. And Chris Pine somehow penetrates that seal. Okay, there is symbology in that. The male penetrating the female. Okay, so that's at a basic symbolic form. Obviously, male has the penis, but we're using the word penetrating and castrating. In my story or in my model, those are the words we're using, okay? So he penetrates the Amazonian island. Men are not allowed on that island, okay? In the myth, the Amazonians were these big warrior type women. The story goes, and some history accounts say that's not true, but the story goes that they chopped off their right breast so that they could do the bow and arrow like Artemis, Diana, and get a better shot, okay, because they were warriors. And then in their left breast, on the left side, they would carry their baby, their offspring. So it was the masculine, the right side always relates to the masculine. So any illness that you might have on the right side relates to the masculine, or relationships. Anything on the left side, like my breast cancer, related to my mother and my children. Okay, so even in that mythology, we see that. Therefore, the energy of the Amazonian was supposedly balanced. This is a metaphysical law called the law of gender. Every single thing has masculine and feminine energies, properties. Okay? So the right side was the masculine warrior and the feminine mother. So within the person, within the Amazonian, these two energies were balanced, right? On paper. The men that would come to the island would be invited only to have sex, because the Amazonians understood that they needed to be penetrated sexually to have a baby. If they birthed a boy, they would castrate the boy. Keep that notion, because that's going to be tied into later, okay? The women castrated the boys, because if their whole thing was feminine power and feminine empowerment, they were the heros gamos. They were the marriage of the masculine and feminine. They didn't need men other than to get penetrated sexually to produce, because that they can't do on their own. So it was very utilitarian. This is super important. There was a utility to that energy, to the masculine energy. We in our society have lost scope of that. Anger, aggression, conflict, creator, whatever word you want to use for masculine or Mars energy, has a utility. So one of the things I see in practice, which is part of the story today, is this idea of a weakling prince usually. And a weakling prince tends to be weak. I think Prince Charles is sort of the epitome of that. Can't speak to his erection, but you know, they usually have limp dick. They're weak in bed, they're weak in life, they don't penetrate life. They were castrated as he was by his mother, Queen Elizabeth, and we see this, okay? That means that if you are weak or you're not penetrating life energetically, you probably have an issue with the aggression or the conflict or the assertiveness issue. Okay, just like those of us that are way assertive, way penetrating, way conflictive, we probably have that overdeveloped. So we start seeing in ourselves that same energy. There is a utility to penetration, to anger, to conflict, to aggression. Yesterday, my son's car got towed. Well, I have an email stating park in guest parking. So I emailed the woman because she's like, oh, I told you to park in overflow. And I said, oh, no, you didn't. And you need to reimburse me. That might seem conflictive. That might seem aggressive. No, there's a utility. I want my $171 back. Since when did that become bad? It became bad when it became toxic, when it became overboard. Violence, domestic violence is an example, okay? So these energies, the way the Amazonians understood was warrior energy, but men and the penis or the virile energy or the aggressive energy or the penetrating energy that we all have is useful with a utility. And this I will also tie back to the monarchy in a moment. Okay, so far so good? Okay, so the babies would be castrated. Now, just on a history lesson, and I'm not a history person, and I go to myth, but because some people are very specific about that, I have read that the Amazonians supposedly only mythological, but the Scythians were the legit population that in history, if you're into history, the Scythian women they have found remains. The other thing that has been said, which I thought was pretty interesting, was that the Amazonians have been criticized for not raising their kids, right? If you're castrating your sons or you're kicking them off the island to go live with their fathers, the fathers would take them off the island to avoid incest and to have them do international relations with other tribes. So there was, again, a utility for the mother giving away the child. Very different than if you're a drug addict and you lose your child because you can't take care of your child. So I just want you to understand that we are all living mythology. But if we go back to the source, we can understand a little bit more about why this is in our psyche. All of these myths, whether you know them or not, all of these metaphysical laws, whether you know them or not, are in your psyche. You're held to them. So better know them and how they're working in your life, which is my goal today with Law of Gender and Law of Pendulum. Hey. So that's why I'm teaching you the laws, because you're going to be held to these anyway. So why not understand how they're working in your life? Okay? So that's what that myth was about. So oftentimes people will come to me and be like, oh, I'm not with my child all the time. I'm a bad mother. No, that's not the way it is. Families look very different ways. And if you go to mythology, you can see that there's an explanation why you're living out that particular myth. That helps people kind of understand that they come from a lineage. So many, many women come from the Amazonian lineage. Just a side funny note, most Amazons tend to have women. Most Amazons or Aries women have this lineage. So you see a lot of women children. So I have a client whose mother was very Amazonian. She had 8 daughters. She in turn became the throne, the keeper of her throne, the queen, Hippolyta, was the queen of the Amazonians. She did that in her family, and then she only had 2 sons. And I remember telling her, I'm like, oh, you didn't want to be overthrown by other women. You didn't want to honor that lineage anymore, and you flipped it around and you honored the sons, and she only had boys. So you start seeing this generationally in the family, who's living out what myth, even by the gender of their children. So I'm going to take this down to the family level because this is a family systems theory that I'm developing based on the original stuff that we already covered. Any questions so far? So that's the Amazons. So here I have a 0 to 100. You guys know that this is my model of 0 to 100, okay? So I want to introduce you to a concept that I call neutralization, okay? It is not the 48 to 52. I have it in the middle with a dotted line to indicate that it's on its way to being a 48 to 52, okay? So we know that you have something that's abundant or scarce in your life, or some trauma, or some parent that you want nothing to do with and you kick that out. That's 0. You go the opposite, which is 100, because we don't know how to do it different than our parents. We do it opposite. That's the 100, so the 0 to 100. How do we get to the 48 to 52? Does it just magically appear? Do we just magically learn? Do we just magically grow? No. There is a law called the Law of the Pendulum in metaphysics that speaks to getting to the 48 to 52, but I'm going to explain to you how to get it into your own life, okay? So I call it a neutralizer. We need a neutralizer. I should have brought the pendulum, but if you ever looked at a pendulum, I'll bring it on Thursday. If you ever see the pendulum, it swings, and it's a psychic tool, and you ask the pendulum a question. Should I go out on this date? It goes 0 to 100, and then eventually it gives you the answer, yes or no, depending on yes or no, if it's this way or that way. But it always neutralizes, or 48 to 52s, in order to give you the answer. But it does swing. So that's the law, okay? And that's how your life is. You swing, and then you get the balance. But prior to getting to the balance, because we are stubborn people, and our spiritual growth is upward, we need opportunities to get to the 48 to 52. We don't just magically understand balance and equanimity because we're born. That's not the way it works. We have to stumble a bit. So I have this idea that we call the neutralizing effect, or the neutralizer. So the Amazonians were the 0. No men, castrated men, female empowerment, right? Well, if you have that thousands of years ago, what do you think happens with the pendulum? If you're all the way here, the pendulum swing, what do you think has to happen? It has to. The law of the pendulum states that as far to the right as it goes, far to the left. So you guys know that I went through a severe depression for 3 years. 0, low, 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 low. Now my pendulum will swing for 3 years to balance that out at a high. That's why we have these swings in our life. I'm going to bring it to relationship and family in a minute. But societally, we go through this. Universally, we go through this. So culturally, we had, or societally, we had these Amazonian women. All women, all women, all women, castrated men. What happened that we've all lived when that went to the other side? I wrote it on the board. What did we create? Toxic masculinity. We slowly, males ruled religion, ruled the world, ruled the family, had the right to vote. We had nothing. Then all of a sudden that started neutralizing. I'll get to that in a second. And we reached the height of toxic masculinity, which now, what are we doing in movie and in culture and in society? What are we doing to men? We're castrating men. We are castrating men. Now, does this need to change? Absolutely. Absolutely. But if we go ahead and just castrate men the way the Amazons used to, guess what? We're going to swing again. And then we're going to swing again, and we're never going to neutralize. So I have a theory that there are neutralizing efforts in society, in culture, in your psyche, in your family, in the universe, that try to help us balance this before we understand that we need to balance a 48 to 52. So as we're building up to the other upswing, something has to neutralize. Okay? Now, my belief is we've gone 0 to 100 and we are trying to neutralize. I don't think that we want to castrate our men. I don't think that maybe in the height of feminism, Gloria Steinem said, women need men as much as a fish needs a bicycle. She later on got married. There's a documentary of hers that I want to see on Netflix, because I think that even feminists, hardcore feminists that are women all, even realize that there's a little too much excess in that. It's 0 to 100, just like the Amazons. So we went 0 to 100, and here bookending are these super feminine empowerment, which again, there's a lot of good that came out of this. Please do not misinterpret, okay? And I'm a woman. But we need a neutralizing effect. And my belief is that the trans community is an effort, psychically, societally, universally, since I work in sort of spiritual worlds, an effort that has been materialized in the earth to balance those swings bookended by the female castrating of men that then become men, you know, treating women poorly and everything we know. Neither extreme works. This is exactly what you do in your psyche with your parents. So I castrated my mother, kicked her out, brought her in when I realized she was the mistress that I needed to integrate, and as a result became a balanced whole person, my marriage with self, which then allows me to have a healthy relationship with a person who's whole, and you know the rest. Now we're bringing it to a bigger thing, which is the family, okay? And the British monarchy example is perfect. And then we'll bring it to your personal family. So I'm a believer, and I was married to a trans man, that was my own way of trying to neutralize my masculine and feminine energies. And I do think, extrapolated as a society, that that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a lot more trans people. Because psychically, looking at a soul level or a spiritual level, and you don't have to believe that, but you know physically it's true, right? Because there's a trans on every TV show. We're hearing more about trans rights, rightfully so. But if you believe at the soul or at the spiritual level, those souls come to educate the masses. I'm not saying that they're special or extra special or anything like that. I'm talking about the soul contract for that time and place that they decided to come and incarnate, is to show us balance, masculine and feminine balance, which we have obviously not had. Okay? I'm not a history person. So if you guys know in history where there are more balanced times, I'm sure it's there as a neutralizer too. I'm using what I know, which is today. Okay, do you understand this? That there is a neutralizer, because this is going to be in your life as well. You are going to have a neutralizer in your life before you achieve balance. I am a believer that the older you are, the closer, so you're probably, like, because you're like me, we're probably in that 48 to 52 way. How old are you? 41? Okay, so you're still a little young. My theory, and I just turned 48 on Sunday, is between 48 to 52 because of Chiron. That's in my book. I've talked to you about that before, that we achieve that, but you're already on the way there, okay? So I'm a believer. I'm not saying it's true, and I do think that the younger generations are going to get this quicker than my generation did because the information is available. But in my Enjoy generation, I do believe that we have to go through a bunch of these swings before we get to that. So what we do in our life, and I'll get to that in a second in terms of your relationship or your job and where you want to apply it, you will find or create a neutralizer. I lived it out perfect. I actually attracted a trans man to neutralize whatever theme you come psychically or subconsciously to work on, so that you can get a handle on your mother, father, child triad. which is the thoughts, which is the subconscious ruler that you've got going on. Your thoughts are dictating your life. So you need to bring in a neutralizer to help you to say, oh shit, wait, I need to redirect the energy. If not, this 0 to 100 never ends. So the way that I'm seeing it in practice and in my own life is 0, 100, maybe 0 to 100, a few swings of those. But eventually you say, shit, I have to change this. Let me neutralize. You bring in a situation or a person or something in your life, neutralizes. You might swing again, and then you get to the 48 to 52, which is the balance. And I'm a believer that it usually happens around this age. Again, I think that the younger generations are going to do less of these swings because there's more information and you guys are just wiser than I was. But that's how I'm seeing this happen. And this goes in line with the law of pendulum. That's a metaphysical law. So all cycles go. This law also states so you're here, you go all the way here, that this is the same as this. So basically, it's coming full circle. So masculine is so feminine. So feminine is so masculine. So the law of pendulum, and we know that the circle is the most sacred symbol, which is the symbol of all sacred geometry and a very spiritual. I wrote a post about the pi and 3.14 in the circumference this week for my birthday, because the circle is so important. Okay, that's why it's the symbol of self, the symbol of the Hieros Gamos, the Vesica Pisces, and stuff that we've covered already. So one swing of the pendulum to the other swing, the law actually states that the opposites touch. Okay, so what you're doing that you think is so different than the other person in your life is why I say you're actually exactly like that person, which is step 2 in the model. What don't you like about this person, place, thing, or situation? Because you are that person. You're mirroring that. And in astrology, we call these oppositions, where people come into our life to mirror something that indeed is exactly what we're doing. So we don't want to do the opposite of your parent that you castrated, that you kicked out of your kingdom, or you think you kicked out of your kingdom. That's actually the horse, the mares, that the parent you think you kicked out, the one you didn't have the wrong alliance with, the mistress, the one at the tip of the triangle, is actually the thoughts, is actually the one who you're co-creating with, is actually the one that are the mares that are ruling your kingdom. And if you don't take control, then you're going to die like Abderus. You have to be Hercules, the hero, and show up for yourself. Hey, Nicole. And control your thoughts, which is knowing your subconscious thought, what we've spoken about before. Any questions about the 0 to 100 and the neutralizer? Because I'm going to bring it over to the monarchy and then to your life. Okay. So I'm going to say these two things in a minute. Okay, so my model is in mythology. I need to kind of educate you as to the mythology so you understand where I get the language. In mythology, there are 3 main gods that split up the world, okay? The father was Saturn, okay? So I have Saturn here as sage in the high vibration or the high consciousness. But Saturn is, in your chart and in your life, what castrates you. So if you know your chart, or you Google your chart, whatever house you have Saturn, I have it in my 7th, so it's in my relationships. That's why I bring it to relationships. That's where you feel castrated. That is where you have been castrated. In the myth, Uranus, which is the sky god, heaven, let's say, gets castrated and Saturn castrates him. But who dethrones Saturn? Jupiter. So where you have Jupiter is where you need to dethrone your parents. You already feel castrated. Saturn will take care of that. You were castrated the minute that you were given a body. You were limited. In your life, you're going to have one theme over and over and over again that's going to reappear, and that's related to your Saturn. So for instance, I have it in my marriage house. my marriage and relationships have been exactly this, and I'm going to explain it today in terms of relationship, but you can bring it to your chart, your Saturn. That's where you're castrated, where you feel limited, and where you live out the law of the pendulum. Okay? Jupiter in the chart. In mythology, Jupiter dethroned his father, Saturn. We have an unspoken rule. I've told you that you don't give up your Costco card to go shop at Nordstrom's. That's my way of kind of saying that. We stay attached to our family story, our family values, even though they're not our own. That's your Costco membership, right? I've got the poster. And we need to go shop at Nordstrom's. Right here. It's related to judgments and values. Newsflash, everything your parents taught you, you don't believe. What you don't believe that your parents taught you, you will not dethrone. You will continue living to that truth. Money is the root of all evil. Men suck, whatever it was. Your father's the only millionaire. You heard these things. You internalized them and said, oh, these are truths. No, these are values. It's either universal truth and why you need to know the spiritual laws, because those laws don't change and you're held to them whether you know them or not, or it's a value system. 99.9% of the things that's causing you trouble in life is a value system. And my guess is you no longer believe that your parents were true. So you have judgments about them and it causes problems in your life. So you have to dethrone your parents. But we were not given permission and use the monarchy. Which of these kings dethrone their parents? Anyone? Any one of them go to their mother or father and say, oh, I'm going to dethrone you. And now, no, they waited till they were dead. Oftentimes, even when our parents die, we won't dethrone them. Then we idolize them, even more, even when they weren't even that great. Because now they're dead and you can't speak ill of the dead. That's a value system. So it's a perpetuation, and then we give it to our kids, and we don't even believe it. So I'm going to tell you mine. Where you have Jupiter in your chart, something that you heard as a value statement that you have believed, and you will not dethrone that parent. So my dad, in the cult leader used to say, the only millionaire here would be my dad. My dad's a hustler. I've said that to you before. And I heard that. Well, if my father is the only millionaire, I can't dethrone him, right? So what do? I limit my financial making abilities because I have to let him be on the throne because he's the king. And Jupiter is the king of Olympus. Jupiter in mythology got the biggest piece of the pie. Neptune got the oceans and Hades got the underworld. So no one's going to dethrone God. And in your psyche, your mother and your father are God, whether you like them or not, whether you met them or not, whether you were born from a petri dish. It doesn't matter. Get over the whole, we get attached to, I never knew them. My father was absent. Who gives a shit? In your psyche, your parents are there. And for some reason, we will not dethrone our parents. It's an unspoken rule, and it comes from mythology. But Jupiter said, dethrone your father, dethrone your mother. Own your throne. Be the ruler of your life. But we don't do that. And we keep repeating these vicious cycles and obliging to value systems that we don't even believe in anymore. And I love my dad, but sure, I want to surpass him financially. Of course I do. So I went to my chart, and guess where I have Jupiter? In the second house of money. So of course, that's where I have to dethrone, and the one who has the money is my dad, so I know it's my dad. This has nothing to do with love. I adore my father. What it is permission that I am allowed to supersede him or do it different. In my case, it's very obvious. It's a financial thing. My sister has Jupiter in her 7th. which is the marriage house. Lucky her. Has a beautiful, wonderful, amazing husband. They are like the Zeus and Hera, the perfect little marriage. She dethroned my parents. My parents made it to 52 years old. She's almost there, but she's on her way there. And she's probably done it better than my parents. So where you have Jupiter, so Jupiter is misunderstood as a planet of abundance. It brings you riches. It brings you everything you want. No, it's where you allow yourself to supersede and dethrone your parents. You don't where the Saturn is. That's why your Saturn is where you're castrated, because you don't give yourself permission to dethrone your Saturn. Only your Jupiter, because in mythology, Jupiter dethroned his father. Funny enough, Saturn castrated his father. But in the psyche, we just hear Saturn castrates, Saturn limits. So I'm going to get to the cycle and how you get to the 48 to 52. But first, you've got to go pendulum swing, pendulum swing, pendulum swing. And your issue is going to be where you have Saturn. I don't need to be an astrologer. You know your issue in life. It could be your family. It could be your children. It could be your money. It could be your health. Everybody knows what their thread is. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? Your parents are the king and queen of your mental kingdom. You have not dethroned your parents. That is why you keep repeating. Good news is that you do have permission. You have to give it to yourself subconsciously to dethrone the parent wherever Jupiter is. We have that permission because myth says so. This is usually where we have a limitation, where we limit ourselves. We shrink, we limit. Wherever we have Jupiter, we tend to do this because we don't want to dethrone our parents, but eventually in our life, we tend to give ourselves that permission. So that's kind of a nice one. That's why all amateur astrologers know where their Jupiter is, because it's like, oh, it's a good luck, it's good luck. It's good luck because in your psyche, if these are psychological organs, you have given yourself permission to dethrone that parent. Okay, Saturn is opposite. In astrology, when we're doing archetypes, oftentimes Jupiter is called the crazy uncle. I don't know if any of you have the crazy uncle, but a crazy uncle might be the cool uncle that comes and brings gifts and travels the world. And I was laughing. That is what you want to be. You're like, ooh, I like the crazy uncle. I want to be the crazy uncle. Because it's about potential that you have that you will allow yourself to become. Saturn, you don't allow yourself to become. You work hard with the pendulum swings. That's the difference of the two. Any questions about that? So I said Aries cusp is where you're limiting your thoughts, where you're not in control of your thoughts, and that house is where you need to begin controlling your thoughts. That's where you're living out these myths. The Jupiter is where you will eventually permit yourself to dethrone your parents, that you could take ownership of your kingdom. And Saturn is where you don't castrate your parents, but you have to, because that's the planet of growth. That's the one that's going to get you to the 48 to 52. If not, you're not going to achieve ownership of your castle. Okay, so I want to take this to the monarchy, okay, because I am going to tie it in to the family, and so I'm going to use the royals for a moment. I am by no means an expert. I did a little research to kind of use my theory and plot it and prove it, so to speak. You might know a lot more. This is not about Oprah and Harry and Meghan. This is an example to show you how things in culture and society, just like the trans community, mirrors what's happening in us. There is a law called the Law of Correspondence. As within, so without. Whatever is happening in your immediate surroundings, like let's say your room is dirty, it could be representative of some chaos you've got going on in your inner state, or societally, that now the trans community is growing by the moment, we need to balance our masculine and feminine energies, or the royals, which has spanned hundreds of years, is explaining our family structure, and it's perfect, okay? So I want to start with Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, and then I'm going to bookend with Queen Elizabeth, which is now, okay? So similar to Amazonians and toxic masculinity, we're bookending feminine power here, okay? What happens? Victoria has a prince, Prince Albert. The queen, I put as a big Venus, the feminine, with a little masculine. She has a prince. She does not have a king. This is where the cycle starts. This is where the zero starts. I know that this is monarchs before. I'm just using these as an example, okay? Then we have Edward VII, who was married to Queen Alexandra. King, queen. Balance of masculine and feminine. Again, I'm not talking about the relationship of what their family looked like. I'm talking about the equality of the throne, okay? Then we've got this married to Queen Mary of Teck. Again, we're moving towards the other extreme, which is what we have today. Then we have a neutralizer. The neutralizer is, something's wrong. We're on our way to the other swing. Something's got to give. And what happens is Edward VIII abdicates. He basically reigned for less than a year, I think, and said, I'm giving up the throne because I love an American divorcee socialite. I want to be married to her. We're not going to talk about it today, but funny enough, that couple never had children. And there's something very symbolic in that couple never having children, although they tried. Okay? He was the neutralizer. He got out of the way. He tried to shift it. Remember before I said that the Amazonians allowed the men to penetrate for the utility of sex, of having children? These monarchs are utility because of political affiliations, because if we marry within another administration or monarchy, we keep power, we keep peace. Marriage was duty. Marriage was a business. We talked about that in marriage class. We're not going to go over that, but that's the origins of marriage. Great book, Committed by Elizabeth Gilbert. She goes into a bunch of history of marriage. There's also a book by Stephanie Kuntz on the history of marriage. 2 great books, if you're interested in that. We did not get married for love, okay? So not only are we moving in the direction of the 0 to 100 for the feminine being the queen with a prince husband, we're also moving in the direction of marrying love rather than utility and duty. So there's 2 things going on here. So Edward VIII abdicates and says, no, if I cannot marry for love my American divorcee socialite, I'm leaving the throne. Scandal. He was the neutralizer. But like in your life, the neutralizer is short-lived because the law must live out. You must go to the other extreme. Okay? At one point in my depression, I got off my meds. I started changing a little bit of my life, thinking that I wasn't ready. My pendulum hadn't swung to the complete end of the depression. I had to wait. So you have to live out certain cycles. And sometimes we try to castrate those cycles and it doesn't work. They come back to haunt us later, bigger and bolder. So he tried. He tried to neutralize and say, hey, people, something isn't working here. Let's marry for love. And the kingdom said, absolutely not. And he left himself. You're going to attract neutralizers in your life. And I'll extrapolate that in a minute. Then we had George VI with Queen Elizabeth, the mother queen. Again, queen and king. And then when George VI dies, Queen Elizabeth now takes over, and she has Prince Philip. So do you see the 0 and the 100 have the same? Remember I said they touch? It's the same. Just like the Amazons, and now every movie is about the woman becoming the king, and the woman is the warrior. Mulan is the warrior, and the Coming to America, the next king is going to be the daughter, which is fine. We're trying to regulate imbalance in our life, in our body, in our society, in our culture. So we create neutralizers like trans community or movies or whatever. In this, the neutralizer was Edward VIII. We stop it, but we have to continue it out. The pendulum must swing. So think in your life, if you want to check Saturn in your chart, you can, but you don't have to. I know in my marriage, this is what it was. I was married to a very, very toxic, abusive man, castrated him, you know the story, and now I'm on the way back looking for that 48 to 52, and I did have a neutralizer on the way. So we'll see that in your life in a minute, but this is how it works. Now, I want to talk about, because I'm going to bring this to your family in a minute, what happened with Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth has 4 children. Again, I am not a monarchy, Brits, royals, history professor. I don't know. I'm looking at this from a metaphysical, spiritual, psychological perspective. Okay? I'm briefly just going to talk about Charles and Anne. She's got 4 kids. Prince Charles, who's next in line for the throne. Anne, who's her only daughter. Andrew and Edward. Prince Charles is next in line for the throne. But guess what? Queen Elizabeth, just like Victoria, she castrated her son. If you don't allow the masculine principle to be equal, prince to princess, king to queen, the child in the system learns, or at least one of them, because if you have many children, different children are going to relate back the problem in different ways. Prince Charles, in my opinion, is a weakling. He's a weak prince. He doesn't have oomph how he's going to be as a king. I hope I'm wrong. I don't really care. But my point is, he's a weak prince. If you castrate the man, what you're sending to the child is men are castrated. She's an Amazonian who castrated her son. Didn't throw him off the island, or some would say she did, but castrated. Anne is a fellow Amazonian, but poses no threat because she's not going to dethrone her. Your parents do not want to be dethroned. For those of you that are parents, you don't want to be dethroned by your children, and you need to be. You need to get the hell out the way and yield so that your child can assume their rightful place. So some of the things I see in practice, it's very common with women and their daughters, especially nowadays at Vanity Rules. I'm so beautiful. I'm so hot. I'm so pretty. You're a freaking daughter, guy. She's the one who's supposed to hot and pretty. So I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and the guy was saying that there was a woman driving her teenage daughters around, and some young guy pulls up to the car, and the mother is like, and the daughter's like, you think he's looking at you? Like, you're old. He's looking at us. We're young. Get out the freaking way, man. That was that ludicrous song. Move, bitch. Get out the way. Get out the way and let your kid assume the throne. So I tell this to my daughter, because my daughter wants to do what I do, and she does astrology, and she's studying to be a therapist and whatnot. I said, you need to dethrone me. Whatever I achieve, you can achieve more. She wants to continue my teachings, create more teachings on top of that. I've got to move out the way. That's my job. So funny story. I've told you guys, and I love my mom. My mother did not want to get dethroned. Saturday night, I had a Heros Gamos party honoring sort of marriage with myself, masculine and feminine energies, with the work that I've done over the past few years when I got cancer. And my mother came to help me set up. My mother had seen on Instagram or Facebook, Who's on Your Throne, the post that I made. I don't know if you guys saw it on Saturday. And she walks into the house and she says, I'm giving you the throne. I said, what? My mom does not play that. My mother is the queen. I said, what? She goes, I saw your post. She goes, I'm giving you the throne. On my birthday, I've done my inner work. I'm having a Heros Gamos marriage with myself party. You think that's accident that this woman who has hogged the universe of my life is now stepping aside, or at least said it, whether she does or doesn't, I don't care. I created that. I showed up for myself and said, I'm taking my throne. I'm assuming my rightful place. And of course she has to move out the way. We don't do this for our children, and we don't kick our parents off the throne. And sometimes I see in practice, sometimes, not always, that if the parent dies, then the child will assume the throne. I've seen that quite a bit in practice, but not every time. Psychologically, sometimes when the parents die, the kid meaning adults, will say, oh, now I can assume the throne. Kids attempt to assume the throne by moving far away, by creating distance, by not talking to their parents. People hate their parents that push them away. That's an attempt to own the throne. It starts here, people. If you don't control those man-eating mares, it ain't going nowhere. I don't care if you go to fucking Australia. And if your mother or father ain't moving out the way, you gotta kick them out. Because it's your mind. It's your throne. They're your thoughts, and it's your life. And guess what? You're gonna trickle this shit down, just like all of these monarchs, to your kids. Then you're going to go to a therapist and say, put my kid on ADD meds, on psychiatric meds, because they're bulimic and they're depressed, when it's them reflecting your shit that you never did, because you never kicked your parents off the throne. And you're basically saying, don't kick me off the throne. And then your child is acting out to say, hey, can we shift here, musical chairs? It's a systemic problem. I'm not negating that some people are depressed. I'm not negating you need meds. I'm not negating that certain kids are suicidal. Please do not misinterpret that. But the mind is the mind is the mind that then informs the body, which is the loyal servant to the psyche, not the other way around. Read my book, got a whole chapter on that, okay? So Queen Elizabeth castrates her son, who is the one that's going to dethrone her, quote unquote, obviously after she dies, but still castrates the poor kid because she comes from the Amazonian lineage. And it's duty. It is duty. She is a duty queen. She's not the neutralizer that's love. The only other love one was Diana, who was also a neutralizer and got killed. Talk about castration. And Harry and Meghan, the next neutralizer. Those are the only three that not married for love. Diana tried, but it didn't work out. Those were the neutralizers of that 0 to 100, 0 to 100, 0 to 100. I don't know if we're going to see in our lifetime a 48 to 52 in the monarchy. I don't know. I care about your monarchy. I care about your psyche, your family, your throne, your client's throne. I don't care about the British monarchy. I'm using them as an example because since it reigned for so many years, you can see the swings. Okay? And then Anne, a fellow Amazonian, poses no threat to her because she's not going to dethrone her. She doesn't need to castrate her. And Anne is a tough cookie. I don't know enough about Andrew and Edward to speak. Again, it's just a metaphor, which I want you to take to your own family in a second. Okay? Any questions on this? The other thing that I find very interesting, and I'm just going to sort of use it as a metaphor, the Queen Elizabeth monarchy is considered the media monarchy because when she started, she allowed her coronation and her Christmas address to be broadcast and stuff like that on TV. And I thought of this from a mythological perspective. Monitor your information from your mind. If you monitor, what do they do? They monitor what information is getting on the tabloids. They have parties for the media to monitor how much information goes out. Of course, this interview with Oprah was not in their control, so they freak. But you have a right to monitor in your monarchy, in your mind, what information comes in and out. What you're going to say, what you're going to do, that's controlling those mares. Okay? So take control of your thoughts. Take control of your mind. Monitor what comes out of your mouth, what comes, more importantly, your thoughts. So that's something we can actually take from this administration that was good, that's applicable. Do you see how the swing has to happen and there is someone or something that attempts to neutralize the swings of the pendulum? Is this clear? Okay, start thinking of your own life. I'm going to give you my example so that you have an example, and I have a client example that I just had this weekend where we worked this. Okay. There's another law called the law of gender. We've talked a bit about this before when I talked about Mulan and her patriotism and the father country, and she's the feminine, and that's why I use that fairy tale. So I just want to tell you quickly a little bit about metaphysics. The circle means spirit. The cross or the arrow means matter. Look at this. The circle of the woman is in alignment with the matter of the man. The sword penetrates the chalice. You need to penetrate. The matter is in alignment with the spirit. Spirit and matter become one. Jesus. The hieros, the marriage to self, and then hopefully the mystical marriage to your partner, is that there is a balance of the sword, masculine energy, and the chalice, the receiver. And in your own life, between your own spirit and your own matter, and I've shared about my story that I wanted to leave my body. I was all spirit, 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 and didn't want to have anything to do with the body. You can't do that. That's the law of gender in spirituality. Okay, so these are all what we're talking about today, just again extrapolated using mythology and using psychology. So what happens in your life? Your mother, father, child, triad. You kick one of your parents out of your kingdom, so you think. You dethrone that parent, you think. You really don't. They castrate you is what actually happens. My mother castrated my femininity. She didn't do it. I did it to myself because I didn't want to be like her. So first identify which parent you castrated you that you think you castrated or kicked out or ran away from. That's your mistress. That's the one at the tip of the triangle that you have to integrate. Now we're learning to hashtag do it differently. And that's the 48 to 52. So you're going to start with that person. Again, every person, place, thing, or situation is your mother or your father. So my first husband was my mother, and he was a king, but one hell of a tyrant. He was a king, well-established, well-to-do, highly educated, owned homes. Great. I married a king. But like my mother, who was the queen, was a tyrant. So that was my 0. Then I went all the way to the other extreme with my second husband. Now I'm trying to neutralize. Hopefully I can, third time's a charm, and I can get to 48 to 52, but that's not always how it works. We usually get a neutralizer person or situation or boss or job to help balance on our way back to the other extreme. Okay? Is this making sense? Can you think of your own life, and most of you are young still, where you start off with a relationship or a job? Kaiser for me is a perfect example too. I start off as the dean. I work all the time. I have no life. I mean, my kids were little. I was with my kids, but I was there open to close. Then I went back to Kaiser, and I had the nursing school, which was my dream job. Talk about 100. I was super, super happy. Got there at 6, left at 2, had the rest of the day for my kids and my spouse. It was amazing. Now Kaiser, this job that I absolutely love, allows me to teach, be with you guys, but also do my practice. It's my 48 to 52. There were neutralizer jobs on the way, other jobs that I had at other schools, but I'm just using the Kaiser example. So Kaiser happens to be the thread. Marriage happens to be the thread. Bankruptcy or debt or finances happens to be the thread. So find your thread. And I guarantee that it's going to show up on your chart, if you want to look at it that way, as the Saturn and the house. And you can Google what the house meaning is. I have it in the 7th, which is my marriage. So in our life, we're going to have 0, which is trying to get away from that parent that we kicked out of our throne, or we think so. Then we're going to go the other direction. We're going to do it the complete opposite of that parent. And then, hopefully, on the 3rd time, we get the balance, the 48 to 52, but not necessarily. We might get a neutralizer. We may go back. We might get another neutralizer. We might go back. That's the people that date or move jobs all the time. Boom, 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 boom. They're like constantly 0, neutralizer, 100, 100, neutralizer, 0, 0, neutralizer. I mean, that's what I feel my relationships have been like. And then you find the balance. And all of the tools that I provided for the thread mate, the I, and the we, the Hercules Mythology, obviously, is to help you get that 48 to 52 in relationship. The 7 gates and the buckets is for you to get the 48 to 52 in yourself. This one is now about the family. The family is a system. Do you remember when I said the relationship is a system? Everything is a system. Remember that? I was talking about the couple, okay? There's only 100% in any system. No more, no less. I want you to think of your mind as your throne, as your kingdom. There's only 100%. First of all, who runs your kingdom? Who rules your kingdom? Who's the king of your kingdom? Who's the queen of your kingdom? Does the king have no king status and is a prince? Is the queen overruling? Identify in your own life what that looks like, first of all. Then take it to your couple. And I always say, not because it's about sex. The law of gender is not about sex. The way we show up in our bedroom is going to tell you a lot. It's the material manifestation of the law of gender. Okay? Are you the go-getter? Are you the sword? Are you the penis? Are you the penetrator of life? Is your spouse the weakling? Do you share it? Is it sometimes him, sometimes you, sometimes her, sometimes her? Do that math. You only have 100%. Start with your kingdom. How much do you give your mother? How much do you give your father? And what's left for you? In my kingdom, my parents reigned supreme. My parents were the quintessential Zeus and Hera. And I was Hephaestus, kicked to the bottom of the ocean. I had no place in Olympus until now, and why my mother said that to me, as I assumed my throne. Who runs your kingdom? In your mind. Don't lie to yourself. If you're constantly thinking about you don't want to be like your mother or like me, let me gain weight to piss my mother off. Let me date the wrong guy to piss my mother off. Let me not wear makeup to piss my mother off. Let me look like shit because my mother's word is image. My mother is Aphrodite. She cares about image. Then she ran my freaking kingdom for 42 years. Who am I kidding? She's the one that I exiled? No, I exiled myself. You got to get real with the parent that runs the show in your thoughts. Those man-eating mares are here. And they're your mother and your father. Whereas my father posed less of a threat, so to speak, because I became my father, but I also adopted my father's aggression. I'm very loud and I yell and I have a short temper. It's okay for him as a man, so to speak, who works in Hialeah in a warehouse. But for me, I want to get polished. I want to have more of my mother, right? I mean, so for my father ran my kingdom in the sense that I allowed him to take over in that respect. So where are you letting your parents run your kingdom? Now, you may not, like me, have kicked yourself out. I literally kicked myself out and I had no space in my kingdom. Zero. I have now put myself as the queen there. So if you have a different scenario, you might just be a little less than. Or your mother's the queen, you're the king. I see that a lot in practice, especially with mother and sons, and the father's the prince. I see that setup. Your father, typical Zeus, Athena, that was partly me. You're Zeus and Athena, your father, daughter, and your mother is the prince. Try to identify who's king, queen, and prince or princess. I want to mention quickly Diana. Diana was also a neutralizer. Diana wanted her marriage to work. She attempted to sort of, like Edward VIII, maybe neutralize or change the monarchy. In our psyche, when Diana died and Diana and Charles didn't work out, we girls specifically realized that happily ever after doesn't exist, that the knight in shining armor isn't coming. I think at a very deep level of our psyche, we understood this, that Charles was not the knight in shining armor. He wasn't Prince Stephen in Sleeping Beauty. He wasn't Prince Charming in Cinderella, and we had to figure it out ourselves. And I think that's why a lot of women went the other direction, like Mulan, so to speak, became the warrior, became the moneymaker, became, the male, wear the pants, all the sayings that we say. Because I think psychologically she impacted us. And I think that Meghan and Harry are trying to be another type of neutralizer. So again, if we're going down neutralizer, we've got Diana and then we've got Meghan. They're just neutralizers. They're trying to neutralize to get out of the duty of that penetration, of allowing the man onto the island. They're trying to neutralize the system so that something differently can be done. That's why it's hashtag do it different. And it goes society and everything as well. I'm more concerned with you and your family and your own life, that you do it differently. But that's another way. So these neutralizers are check-ins in our life, in our psyche, that show us that there's another way to do it. It could be someone in your life, it could be a friendship, it could be a boss, it could be a mentor, it could be a teacher. But there are other ways to do it. You just don't know how, because in your kingdom, this is the way it's always been done. So neutralizers show up in your life to kind of nudge you and say, hey, do it differently. You may take 10 more swings of that pendulum. You may not do it in this lifetime. That's your choice. But you are provided the opportunity to see it done differently. Neutralizers show up in your life. The psyche creates them. I always say that homeostasis in the body helps us. So we've got this system that if we don't drink enough water, we don't pee. Our body holds on so that we don't get dehydrated. That's physical homeostasis. Our psyche doesn't have that. Our psyche homeostasis harms us. Mom and dad are king and queen, and you're prince or princess. Let's keep doing it. We're going to keep that balance. The neutralizer, in my belief, is an attempt to do it differently. We just don't know how. So someone, in my opinion, we created that. Someone comes in to help us neutralize, to show us there's a different option. We may or may not do it. We may or may not take the opportunity. That's free will. But I do believe, and people say, oh, my angel, or this person's an angel. That person is your neutralizer, that angel, that's showing you there's a different way from your swing back and forth. Is this clear? So identify in your kingdom, king, queen, prince, or princess. If this is mom, and this is you, this is your dad, right? That's one example. You can share the throne with mom. What is that going to represent in your romantic relationship if you're queen and your spouse is prince? You got two examples right here. If your mother or your father is king and you're the queen, your spouse, I'm just giving an example, so it's your mom, what's this going to represent in your daughter, as an example, if you're a woman? You're not going to make way or yield for your daughter. It's musical chairs. There's 3. I will take it in a moment if you have more children like I do. But this is your mind. Figure out who's the king, who's the queen, and who's the prince or princess. It's the same thing, mother, father, child. It's the alliance, another way of saying it. But now for some reason I feel royalty, so I'm using the royalty. Okay, so identify. If you already assume the queen, there's no room for your daughter. That might be appropriate up until she's 16 or 18. I'm not telling you to put your daughter on the throne with your husband. That is another rearrange that doesn't work. But identify who has what role. If your parents are the king and queen, you're the prince and princess. You're not supposed to be the prince or the princess in your life as an adult. As a child, that's fine, but not as an adult. You need to dethrone those guys. So that's the first, it's the individual. You will then bring this to your family. Okay? The mother, the father, and the child. I have 3 kids, so I use 3. People love to say I have 3 different kids and they're all different personalities. I have twins and they are completely different personalities. Why do you think, how many of you have siblings? Okay, you different from your sisters and your brothers? Everybody's like, yeah, of course. Do you know why? Any idea why you're so different from your sibling, even though you were all raised in the same home, hopefully by the same parents? Not everybody has that story, but I'm just using that as an example. Each one is a shadow of the parent. Absolutely. So I've got my son who calls me out on my shit. Every time he speaks, I'm like, damn, you're a magician. Okay, gotta work on that. He's not, that's part of me, right? That's my light aspect in a way, because I'm always. I've got my daughter who's just like me, but she really is her father. She's all her father. She's trying to integrate me. So when I see her, I remind, oh God, I gotta work on, because my ex-husband was my mother and my mother is in me. So it's just trickle back to me, to what I have to work on. So it reminds me, oh, I gotta work on that. And then my other son is quiet. He's kind of like the neutralizer 48 to 52. He's silent. He's the reminder, Francis, shut the hell up. You talk too much. I got small, medium, large. My daughter's like me, loud. Spencer doesn't say a word, 0 to 100, and then Steve is sort of midpoint. And I can take that to ambition. I can take that to energy level. I can take that to how much they talk. I can take that to so many things about me and my ex-husband. Because they are us. They are the mental representation. They are the physical representation of our mind at the moment we conceived them. At the moment we conceived them. So they're reminding me what a piece of shit mother I was. Because I was a piece of shit. I didn't know shit from Shino. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I say that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to him. I understand now. And I'm working from a higher state of consciousness. And every day I try to get better for them so that they don't have to do my work. Parents, do your work so your kids don't have to. Eventually, you're all adults. You're going to have to do your own work. Get over that your parents are what they are and move on. But if your parents are lucky to be alive and actually do their work, as is the case with me and my children, they're going to reap the benefits of my work because we're all one. It's a system. So my sister and my brother have now assumed the responsibility for my mother. I was my mother's therapist. I was my mother's mother for most of my life. When I get breast cancer, knowing everything is a system, I have to pull back because I have to take care of myself. It was the only way. I had to create an illness to assume my throne. If not, I would have never dethroned her. Not her fault, my fault. That was the way my psyche knew how to do it, so I did it. Great, here I am. But sometimes I'll get a text from my brother or my sister or something about my mom. And I say to myself, there's 100% in the system. If I jump in again and do 70%, I'm only leaving them 30. So I've decided that I'm taking 33% of the responsibility. We're going to share the responsibility. I have to hold back because my natural tendency is to jump in, nurture, rescue, save, all that great stuff, because I too am a narcissist, and why I'm a therapist and all the stuff I've told you before, and a Pisces and the suffering and blah, blah, blah. So I have to check myself and say, no, you have to do that. If there are other people in the system for your brothers and sisters, I'll get to your kids in a second for those of you who haven't when you have kids. Don't assume all the responsibility. Same thing with your spouse. I write this in the book. If you do the laundry 100% of the time, do it 50% of the time. Magically, that shit's gonna get done. Right? They're gonna call a fucking housekeeper or they're gonna wash it themselves. That shit is gonna get done. Stop being a freaking martyr. Oh, no, I don't do the laundry. Oh, hell, everybody eats in my house. I go to the store and I put the food on the counter and they somehow figure it out because mama don't cook. Are you kidding me? I cooked for 20 years. You guys are in college. Figure it out. I'll buy it. That's my job. That's my 50%. You're so invaluable. Every single one of you have left a job, either fired or quit. And girlfriend, they replaced you and no one cried. You left, even if you were there for 20 years. Get over yourself, man. You're not that important. Make yourself important and own your throne. That's the only importance you have. And stop passing on your shit to your kids. That's unresolved because you never looked at it. That comes from your parents. That's our only job. That is our only job, and we suck at it. I sucked at it. I do it now. I do it now. My kids are A++ with me because they see that I do it. Can't speak to their father, not my problem. That's their karma with him. But my side of the street is clean. Dethrone your fuckers. Take your kingdom, organize the freaking chairs, put people where they belong. Is your child your king and your husband the prince? Shift that shit. That's chaos. That's tyranny. There's two king archetypes, the tyrant king and the one that restores order and balance. Which one is living and reigning in your head? Restore the balance in your kingdom. And if the fucker you're married to doesn't work for you, kick the guy out and restore order in your kingdom. But don't whine and complain. Are you working duty or are you working love? And when I talk love, I'm not talking about, oh my God, Edward VIII, he loved his divorcee wife so much. That is an attempt at self-love. Are you all about duty, responsibility? That has a place. There's a place in your kingdom for duty. You have to pay your bills, you gotta do the laundry, you gotta cook the food, you gotta go to sleep, you gotta work, obviously. But is your kingdom like this monarchy? Duty. There's no fucking love in these people. They're like devoid of love. It's crazy. And we're devoid of self-love in our kingdom. When you start organizing your chairs and you rearrange the throne, there's room for duty because the parents have to parent the children and put them to sleep at a normal time and feed them their vegetables and read them a story. But there's also room for love. And if you go back to the original model, your kids came to meet your needs. You didn't come to meet theirs. And when you do this, probably as an adult, like I did with my kids around 15, when I got cancer, that's when I started rearranging. Then I actually started really meeting my children's needs. And now I can say I'm a good mother. Now I can say I'm not a piece of shit parent. Up until then, those kids were meeting my needs. Rearrange that sucker. It's screwing them up, it's screwing you up. No one knows where they're going. The relationships are affected. Family, transgenerational trauma, ancestry trauma. It's a shit show. So you start with the neutralizer as a mirror to what you need to balance in your life. Look at your throne. Who sits where? If your children are running the show and they're sitting in the queen and queen spot, you're in trouble. A lot of people are doing that these days. Kids ruling the house. Come on now. They're the biggest tyrants, those kids. They need order and structure. You need order and structure. You need duty. But everyone needs some love too. This is the sides of the coin. This monarchy is all duty. They will backstab you because of the duty, because of the loyalty to the nation. Again, I'm not British. I'm not criticizing them. I'm using this from my model to the family. They just happen to play it out perfectly as a mirror image. And those that have attempted to neutralize have attempted to inject love. If you don't organize your musical chairs of your throne here, that then turns into your relationship, that then turns into your cup, your family, your duty, and no one has any love. Then we wonder why everybody ends up in therapy and everyone's depressed and no one's happy and people are cheating and blah, 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 blah. These are the scales that need to be balanced. Neither extreme works. The pendulum is going to swing until you get to a point that you can achieve balance, which is the 48 to 52. The neutralizer is something or someone or a situation in your life that shows up to show you there's a different way to do it. It doesn't always take, as we've seen. Diana died, this guy abdicated, we'll see what happens with Meghan and Harry. But you have these same players in your life, and they come all the way from mythology. I just took it from the monarchy. Any questions on your throne here and how you live that out in your relationship first? The energy, and it does not matter if it's two men, two women, male or female. It's the balance of the energies, the masculine, the feminine. There is no right or wrong. Please do not misinterpret. If you want to be all masculine and your spouse wants to be all feminine, if it works for you, good job. There's only 100% of the system. But if you're complaining, then it's not working for you. Then you can shift it. Now, your family. Again, there's only 100% of the system. If your husband and you, or the parents are the king and the queen, and the children, then you have to decide, are the children being treated equally? Is each child 33%, for instance? I mean, there's 100% of the system, so it's not going to be, but let's just focus on the kids for a moment. Each child is demonstrating to you something that is wrong in the system, or something that's right in the system. Two, obviously kids are good and bad, just like everybody. There's something you do not like in your child. It is you who created that. She castrated him. She can't stand the guy. Just watch The Crown. I don't know if that's accurate, but she's this strong woman. She looks down at her son with disdain, like, ugh, you're such a weakling. You look at your kid like that, and everybody does. You know how you think about your kids. And when your kids tell you they're the black sheep and their brother's a favorite, you know all that shit is true. Come on now. You do. You're laughing. You know it's true. I don't have favorites, and I swear I do not have favorites, and I know I don't have favorites because I was the black sheep. So the only way to do it differently was for me to make sure that my children. But do I do a little thing? The other day, jokingly, there was a meme. Parents say they don't have a favorite. Parents email password, first child's name. That's me. I sent it to the group chat as a joke. Obviously, my firstborn is not my favorite. but you do different little things. If you're doing different little things, I have one daughter, I'm going to treat her different than the boys for different reasons, but there's no favoritism. Of course, there's going to be some variation. There's different people. But if there's something really in your kid that just bugs the shit out of you, look in the mirror, man. It's you. You know why I admire my son so much? The kid doesn't say a word. He is a vault. I ain't got that. Maybe have the potential someday. I don't know, time soon. I admire it. It's uncomfortable sometimes because silence can be uncomfortable, and I obviously don't work well in silence. I work well in personal silence when I meditate and stuff, but with people. So I admire it, but I could hate it. I could be like, oh, I hate that. He never talks. But no, I understand it's a quality that I have, that I want. So what bugs you about your freaking kids is what bugs you about yourself that you didn't do. Go back to the moment of when you conceived them so you can find out why. I played victim. My ex-husband was the king, the tyrant king. Two sides of the coin. Same coin. Yes, on paper, I was the victim. I'm the one who got abused. But what did I have in me that we were the same? Because if my model holds true, that the buckets are the same for both parents, just with different names, covert, overt power, I have to own that I created that arranged marriage, even though it was arranged. There's a reason all these people lived out the way they did. This blame game of our kids and they're the problem. No, go upstream. Up. And it starts here, and find the myth if you really want to know. That's what helps me. I go to the myth. I'm like, what myth am I living? Because that's in the collective unconscious. That's what's creating this one. Upstream is here, your mind. Go to the origin. Go to the creation story. I had a client this week call me. She's having bleeding. She's pregnant. And she's scared she's going to lose the baby. I said, tell me about the night you know you conceived the baby and everything around it. And we discovered exactly why she was hemorrhaging.
She was hemorrhaging?
She's bleeding.
Well, some people bleed during pregnancy.
No, but the doctor said she was at risk of miscarriage. She's 3 weeks in.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Go to the origin. You want to know why your kid is acting. Go to when you conceive that child. I had a client, I think I wrote about her in my first book, that didn't want to tell her mother that she was pregnant and said, oh, I have to keep it a secret. So one day we were in a session and I said, oh, your son is homosexual. And she's like, really? And I said, yes. And I said, let's go to the origin. I said, what happened when you found out you were pregnant? She goes, keep it a secret. And he was keeping it a secret. She found out accidentally as a friend, something that he said in school. And that origin is something in you that you have not rearranged in your kingdom that comes from here. This is pearls stringed together, stringed together. Nothing is independent of one another. That is how your kingdom here trickles down into yourself, marriage with self, third chakra, marriage with your partner, second chakra, and your children, and creates in the earthly realm, first chakra, everything you're living. You created from not controlling the man-eating mares. Go to the Aries cusp to find out what those thoughts are that are controlling your life. Go to Jupiter to know what the hell you need to dethrone in your parents so that you can surpass them, because you have a right. I have a right to surpass my father financially. I love him, but it's my turn. And Saturn is my limiting factor that castrated me, which is relationships. And I'm going to live this out. And I did. I was with a tyrant. I castrated a man who had prostate cancer, couldn't function. My neutralizer was my trans husband trying to balance masculine and feminine, and now I'm in a healthy relationship. We will live this out. If you choose to not, I am a believer, and I have to test this theory out, and today you're my guinea pigs, but I am a believer that neutralizer shows up because it's like a guardian angel or a guide or so, like the fairy godmother type of thing, like Joseph Campbell said, a helper. I'm a believer of that. But let's say it doesn't. You're going to continue the 0 to 100 until you decide you want to do the 48 to 52. That is a free will. When you start looking at your 0 to 100 and you decide to 48 to 52. But I do believe that there's a neutralizer or many neutralizers. Here's 3 that interrupt the system to show you a way to hashtag do it differently. Any questions on this? Let me just make sure. Oh, I do want to say one more thing for people that are in long-term relationships. Okay. So here I put your pattern 0 to 100, neutral, or the neutralizer, and then 48 to 52. And this is specifically for relationships. However, it's the same cycle if you're at a job for 30 years. Okay, but I'm just going to say it to relationships. If you are lucky enough to be married 35 years, let's say, you're going to live out this same 0 to 100 and 48 to 52 are neutralizer. Your cycle is going to be 7. So yesterday I had a client, couples. They're 3 years married. I see that they can have another child. It's going to be a daughter. She wants a daughter. He doesn't want it yet. And I said, look, we have things to work on the marriage. And then at the 5 to 7, when you have your first crisis, that's when you're first castrated in your relationship, then have the child, because that will be now the next renegotiation. But if you have it now, at that child's 2nd or 3rd birthday, it's going to be a crisis. If you haven't done the work, the relationship can split up, and now you have 2 little kids. So we use these tools to kind of see the patterns. So you're going to have, just like in your story, your skinny cows at 5 to 7 years old, in your story, 0 to 7, your relationship, whether it's marriage, whether it's a job, whether it's your car, doesn't matter. And Thursday, I'm going to teach you about the mystical Enneagram so you can track your cycles. That's a personality tool, but I don't use it as a personality tool. That's very mainstream. I'm going to bring it to you to the mystical so you can see the cycles in your life like this. So at your relationship with your car, your spouse, your job, you're going to have at the 5 to 7 your first castration. You're going to feel castrated. You couldn't get the job, you couldn't get the car, you had another kid, he got, he fired, and now you have to pick up the slack, whatever the story is. That's going to take you from 0 to 100 because your relationship was built on a snow globe. The fantasy is 0. The first castration comes at 7, 5 to 7. Maybe something will neutralize. Again, that's to be seen, and you'll plot that in your own life. Then the next 7 years, you're going to go another 0. Then the next 7 years, you're going to go to 100. Then the next, so when you're married or at a job or with a car for 20, 30, 40 years that you could plot this, you're going to plot the 0 to the 100, the 0 to the 100, the 0 to the 100, until the couple, someone shifts the system, you get your 48 to 52. Your neutralizer might be a vacation. Your neutralizer might be a child. Your neutralizer might be winning the lottery. Something in the relationship is going to help to neutralize, to try to shift the system. It may or may not, because the pendulum has to swing, but something will show up. So I work with clients to kind of identify what the neutralizer is and what the neutralizer is trying to teach us. So if my husband that was trans was my neutralizer to teach me to balance because eventually it all goes back to us and our kingdom, my masculine and feminine energies, then I need to use that neutralizer to inform my next pendulum swing. Does that make sense? Okay, I would like for you guys to track this in your life. Any questions about the myth, what you have to dethrone, that you limit yourself because of what your parents have achieved? I also want to give you the flip side of that, because I don't want you to misinterpret, because last week I told you about scarcity and abundance. Jupiter is the abundance. You could, quote unquote, try, because the psyche doesn't know anything to do the opposite, to overthrow your parents if they're so rich. And I have a client like that. They were trust fund babies. She's like, I don't want to be like my parents. She works hard. She's a hairdresser, and she charges very little. She works and works and works and works and makes no money. That was her attempt to overthrow her parents, which were trust fund babies. So they had the abundance, and she was trying to do it differently. That's part of what we do when we try to overthrow. I try to overthrow my mother by saying, I don't need makeup and let me be fat. Didn't work for me. So we try to overthrow them opposite. With my dad, I didn't have that problem because he wasn't the problem parent. But the one that you kick out, the mistress, is the one that you tend to overthrow different. But it's not the right way. Assuming your throne, like I did on Saturday, and hence my mother said, I give you the throne. That's when you do it, #do it differently. So I've decided to integrate the good of her and the not so good leave alone. That's the way to dethrone. Any questions? Okay, girls on the computer, let me stop and I'll take attendance.